welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays, the first episode of the year. Hope everyone's 2023 is off to a great start. I am your host, Nina Joshi. And before we bring on our guest for today, just wanted to let everyone know that the AARP Challenge, the application has been extended to the 17th. So if you are interested, please make sure that you sign up before that deadline. All of the information is going to be in the chat. And today wanted to also officially welcome our guest, Mansa Shroff, who is the Director of Business Development and Chief of Staff at WorkSmart. As you know, we love questions here at Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. So if you have any for Mansa during our conversation, please be sure to add them to the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and I will make sure that we get to it. And so with that, we'd like to formally bring on our guest. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here, Mansa.
Hi, Nina. It's wonderful to be here too. Can you hear me fine?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome.
Great. Well, would love to kind of kick off the conversation really just by, having you introduce yourself to our audience and really just tell us a little bit more about your background.
That's awesome. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Been a part of HitLab's ecosystem for over a year now, and there's always so much to learn. So it's good to be a part of this conversation where I can share a bit more about my journey. So thank you so much for calling me here. As you introduced me already, I'm the Director of Business Development at WickedSmart. It's a digital health startup in Boston. We're producing a home-based AI platform that delivers complete real-world data from patients with neurodegenerative diseases, so Parkinson's, ALS, Huntington's. In my other hat, I am an advisor for life sciences and digital health startups in two different communities. One of them is Disrupt, which is based in the US, and the other one is Bio Expert Network in Spain.
Wow, that's incredible. It's, being able to be an advisor as well as kind of working in the space. Would love if you could kind of share more about, really your journey into the digital health space. Is it something that you were always interested in? Was there kind of this moment that made you fall in love with it? Would love if you could share some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really interesting question because this is not how I had planned my life. You happen to come across really interesting opportunities and then you take it up, with that excitement of just learning something new. And that's precisely what happened. So, I really couldn't have predicted where I am today. But in a very short amount of time, I've seen many, many incredible aspects of healthcare, digital health, through my experiences. So just taking a step back, I'm born and brought up in Mumbai. I studied in the US for 6 years and then moved into digital health through my experiences. So I started my journey as a microbiologist in University of Wisconsin-Madison in the Midwest. So very different from Mumbai, where I grew up. Obviously, seeing the snow for the first time, being in a much smaller student body was different than being in a metropolitan city like Mumbai. But, having had all of those experiences, I had one thing in mind, which was I wanted to be a microbiologist. Maybe the PhD route is for me. And I was actively involved in lab research. And very early in the game, I realized this is not my sweet spot. This is this is probably not where I should be leaving an impact. So I started interning at Wisconsin's Technology Transfer Office, which at that time was, still building its out-licensing portfolio. So out-licensing means to work with innovation coming out of Wisconsin and then bringing it outside of the ecosystem, to other parts of the US or parts of the world. And they were looking for people to enable that, to accelerate that. And that aspect was really interesting. So I interned there. It was actually a very interesting opportunity that I found through networking. So, I think that was one of my main experiences that I highlight and I keep introspecting on, which is what has brought me over here. So at Wisconsin's Technology Transfer Office, I was supporting out-licensing for these startups, specifically focused on market expansion. And they were all life sciences startups, had nothing to do with digital health at that point in time. But that in itself, the exposure of working with startups was so exciting. And I found it challenging. I found it stimulating. And I think in a way, I just enjoyed putting out fires all the time, so you work with these startups and they're trying to figure things out. And that excitement was very contagious. And I feel that's something that has kept me involved in the startup world for over 6 years now. And I hope that, people listening to this webinar, if they're in the startup world too, they take this key message from here. In 2018, I moved to Boston to work at Harvard's Global Health Institute on some of pressing healthcare research topics. So we were focusing on gene therapy, supply chain for vaccines, value-based care. And then one of the projects there was digital health. And that was my opening door, into digital health. So very long-winded, but, having been here with all of that experience helps. It gets you a bit more mature. So I was working with this group called Berkman Klein Institute for Internet and Society that had a project called Global Access in Action. And I found that topic really exciting because of my upbringing in Mumbai and then my experiences of seeing how healthcare is hugely, disparate here in India based on your income level. And I also saw that happening in the US. And I asked myself, what does it mean to have these disparities in healthcare, and if potentially technology could be a solution for it. Right. So working with the Global Health Institute and supporting this project at the Global Access in Action, I was able to kind of put these two pieces together, my upbringing from India and my understanding of the low and middle income countries, and then the experiences of how you could potentially use different aspects of technology. It can be as basic as mHealth, which is mobile health, but also as sophisticated as AI and digital twins, right, to improve access to healthcare. So that's my long story.
Love that. Yes. Already have so many questions for you. I think kind of starting with kind of the work that you're doing, right? Like your introduction into digital health and the work that you are doing with WorkSmart and some of these, neurodegenerative diseases. Would love if you could share a little bit more about, what is your role kind of in this particular space? For those that maybe have not heard of the company, would love if you could dive in a little bit into kind of the role that you play when it comes to these, important conditions and topics.
Yeah, absolutely. So with the startup, WickedSmart, we're a bootstrap startup right now, very early in the process of understanding how we can build a hardware that can be kept almost in the corner of your room to monitor patients at all points in time. Wow. The vision with this hardware is to be able to empower patients and caregivers to better monitor how the movement disorders, the disease itself, progresses. So, with Parkinson's, ALS, Huntington's, you have changes in your muscle, you have changes in your movement, and it's hard to capture them, during your clinical trials versus when you're in home. So what happens with clinical trials is it's sporadic. You go into a trial, you give your blood test, you do some tests that is asked of you on the first of a particular month. Then you're asked to go in the next month. So you have this gap of 30 days when no one sees you, no one knows how much you've changed, no one knows if you've had multiple falls in the house, right? Unless you as a patient keep a record of all this, and then you go back to your clinical trial and tell them, hi, this is how my levels of movement, my muscle control has been changing over the past 6 months. So an innovative way to tackle this by, empowering patients and caregivers is to bring the hospital at home, bring the clinical trial at home, right? So the vision with WickedSmart is to be able to integrate our platform into the clinical trials such that we have a hardware device that monitors these patients who are involved in the clinical trial. They measure gait, they measure speed, they measure any sudden adverse events like falls. You can give them prompted tests. You can ask them to walk on the staircase. You can ask them to, understand their cognitive functions, because some of them also have impairments in cognition through an iPad. So we have partner devices as well connected to our hardware. So we're in the process right now to validate this, and we're looking for partners to verify this platform with. So in my role as the Director of Business Development, I lead these conversations. I look out for and I reach out to pharma partners, industry partners, technology partners who could either help us co-validate or who could be a part of our research so that we can have better access to a larger patient population, within the US and within Europe, which are two huge markets where these specific neurodegenerative diseases are a huge burden. So that's my role.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. And you speak to, I think, a really interesting gap, I think, currently within the clinical trial space is that there is also much gap of that just not exposed or really kind of documented in any way. So being able to have something that is 24/7, I would imagine can expedite so much when it comes to the clinical trial process.
Yeah. And, you touch upon a very important 24/7, criteria for clinical trials. I think along with that, it's important to think about clinical trials from a real world perspective, right?
Absolutely.
So when the patient goes into clinic, they know they're being prompted to do certain things. So it's almost not as natural as being in the comfort of your home, right? So if the patient is just living their life, but you're able to monitor them, obviously given their consent, and there are these series of privacy issues and flags that we have to deal with, which we're trying to figure out right now. After you overcome all of that, you have all of this data from the patient that has been captured 24/7, which is real world data. And it's continuous. So as a physician, who's looking into this patient, could go in and access this data and understand, okay, as this patient is progressing in their Huntington's disease, their muscle control has deteriorated by XYZ% over the past 8 months. What could I change, or what kind of physical therapy should I give them, or what other medicines should I provide them so that they can have better control or have a better quality of life moving forward? So I think it's coming from that perspective.
Absolutely. And you bring up such a good point about how, health goes so much beyond just the four walls of an exam room. So being able to actually monitor and kind of see things in life and not in a very controlled setting. I can only imagine, the great benefits that come with that. That's incredible work.
Yes. Wow. Thank you. We're very excited to take this further. So yes.
That's amazing. One of the things I also wanted to touch on that you had mentioned is, some of the work that you've done and what you've seen when it comes to, your experiences with, low or middle income countries and kind of what you are releasing within the digital health space. Would love if you could share. I mean, that just sounded so interesting. And I think that access is such a pervasive question that I think a lot of people are asking, especially now that we're seeing, technology and digital health isn't just a nice to have anymore. It's becoming foundational.
Yes.
So would love if you could kind of share, some of the learnings that you've had with this experiences and, some additional opportunities for us to consider moving forward as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, while my time at Harvard, I think that project was so eye-opening because I saw how healthcare was different for me living and growing up in Mumbai versus, when I moved to Boston, and then I saw that it was still different there. And it all depended on where you were born, what part of the city you were born, what era you were born in, what your health literacy is, what your digital literacy is. I mean, there are so many factors, right, that impact you and that enable you or that distance you from getting access to basic healthcare. And, for someone working in this industry, we have to come together and we have to bring together different stakeholders so we can create a system that's very patient-centric, that enables patients to access healthcare from whichever level they're at, right? So I think that was the whole goal for the projects at Harvard. But one of the key things they were focusing on was low and middle income countries. So I worked on this really exciting research for 2 years at Harvard. We interviewed a couple of startups in India and Africa. And, through the process of interviewing these startups and working on this mission of understanding, could digital health be applied to low and middle income countries? If the answer is yes, what aspects of digital health could it be? Could it be as basic as mobile health, which is your SMS, your WhatsApp, or could it be as sophisticated as AI, machine learning, Internet of Things? And if we are able to apply it, how do we scale it? Because applying is one challenge, scaling is another. And then you have another challenge, which is adoption, right? Because there's cultural influences, there's a stigma around digital tools, there might be lack of literacy. So we're playing in a very different field when you're looking at digital health within the low and middle income country. And we specifically picked Asia and Africa, and within that South Africa and India because of our experiences. So my mentor happened to have a lot of experience in the South African ecosystem. And because of my upbringing in India, I was very comfortable understanding the cultural nuances behind the use of and the adoption of digital tools. So that was the reason why we picked these two countries. And even within that, after researching for 2 years, speaking to these startups and understanding what they have applied to their healthcare challenges, we've kind of come up with a couple of conclusions, and they happen to be all encompassing. So A, we need proper infrastructure. B, it's really important to understand that AI can drive interventions only if you have promising public health resources available for these countries, right? So you have to have your government interventions, you have to have your local physicians or your outpatient clinics in a proximity where patients could go to them. I think there's also some more clarity needed on the policies and regulations around how to build a digital tool in these countries and also how to scale them. You have to further define roles of government, of policymakers, and obviously there is one key thing: it's funding, right? You have to find areas where you can fund these startups, and you have to allow them to grow, and that in itself, takes a bit of a time.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you bring up such an important part, I think, one, when it comes to really the policy component of it and how that's so intertwined when it comes to standing up and, like you were saying, scaling these types of solutions.
Exactly.
And I really like that you mentioned kind of the cultural component, because I think that is something that can get a little bit lost. Really the adoption, I think that is so fascinating. And I love that you kind of called that out as well.
Yeah. So on the cultural point, let me, share this experience I had with a startup in India. So Niramai is a startup based in India, and they're building a tool for early detection of breast cancer, which obviously is one of the major burden for women in India, specifically in terms of cancer. What was interesting is the founder herself had a family member who went through cancer, and it was hard to diagnose it early in the game because there was stigma around going into clinics and getting yourself tested. It's as simple as that. Women are not encouraged or allowed or have some sort of stigma around going into the clinic to actually get tested, because the mentality is, if it's not showing up, why do you have to go get tested, right? So it's almost like their focus is, let's focus on the cure rather than prevent it. And having been in India for the past 2 years, because I work remotely for Wicked Smart from Mumbai, I've seen a huge change. I've seen people really focusing on preventative health, everything from wearables to changes in nutrition and diet and lifestyle. But there are still parts of India that that startups like Nira might tackle, right? Where they're building low-cost early detection tools that women have access to breast cancer screening. And it starts with, building a makeshift telephone booth in the corner of your village where women can go in. They feel safe to, wear a proper attire to get their breast cancer screening done. So it's almost as if you also have to tackle the comfort of each patient in different geographies. Maybe women in Indonesia are much better off doing this, or women in the UK, they feel like it's almost like a blood test. They have to just get it done. They have no problem with it. But if you think about it from an Indian perspective, they may not have the comfort that these other women do. So I think that in itself is also a really interesting aspect that investors have to look out for, because it gets harder to scale it because patients are unable to adopt to these kind of technologies.
That's really, really interesting. I did not know that when it comes to this perception around prevention. I think that's super fascinating, and I think kind of speaks to how these types of initiatives that are kind of locally kind of stood up are probably going to be the ones that really can tap into the culture. So I think that's super fascinating.
Yes, that's true.
One of the things that I learned about you is that you also have a series, right, called Teach Into.
Yes, I do.
And I love, and so, because I definitely did some digging. I was just so like, I was so excited to interview you today. And I
Thank
know
you.
that
That's so sweet of you.
yeah. And I know that you have this series really just about like information. And it seems like a lot of the work that you're doing really involves like being able to have these types of conversation, like health and tech literacy. So I would love if you could share a little bit more kind of about the inspiration behind this channel.
Yeah. So very interesting question. And thank you so much for looking into the work that I've done previously. Teacher 2 is a very unique project. So, I was new to the world of digital health. I had to learn it on the go. And I think I had excellent resources such as LinkedIn and HitLab and Dime and Health Excel and all of these amazing communities that are doing fantastic work. But it gets hard to access it when you're not a corporate member or you don't have a startup, right? It gets hard to understand the work that they're doing, or the jargon, the lingo, or what's happening in the industry. If you come to it as a student or a doctor or a physical therapist, right, and you want to understand, just out of your curiosity, what does digital health hold for me? How does it make sense to me in my profession, in my career? And I think I started thinking about Teach-In too from that perspective. So I worked with someone who was an aspiring doctor, and he's moved on to that aspect now. So unfortunately, I lost my co-partner there. But what we built together is, we took a very complex and sophisticated clinical trial or a digital health specific jargon, like digital twins. And we tried to simplify it in a way that you could explain it to your younger cousin or your parents or, someone who is in marketing. And they just want to convey the simplest and the most nuanced version of what that term really means. So to be able to kind of bring it from here to here, that in itself was a wonderful learning opportunity, because I was here and I had to work upwards. So now I was going backwards. And then so we started to think about all of these different jargons and tools that we use in digital health, even AI for that matter, right? We throw these terms across like AI and digital twins and patient centricity, but what does it really mean? What does it mean in terms of, the product that you're building, or the patient that you might affect, or the data that you might gather through it? So we tried to work through those by simplifying it. And our goal was to bring on board, experts in the region in that space, so that they could also share a bit about what they have done. So my goal, all in all, was to take a very complex concept, simplify it either by myself through my learnings, or bring on board an expert who works in this space, and they share what they think is the simplest way of understanding it.
Wow, I love. It's funny because there definitely can be its own shared language with kind of those that are within the industry, and I love that your goal was to kind of make it like easy to digest, bite size for those that are touching digital health, because I think we all are at some point, but may not really understand the language or kind of the specific terms that are being used.
Right. And I think we're all health is now has so many different access points to digital, right? Digital kind of is a part of our life. It could be through your WhatsApp and your LinkedIn and your Zoom, and it's just a part of our day-to-day life. So there are so many of us who are looking into digital health, and it's hard to come across it if you're not in the industry per se. So just trying to make it easier for other people coming in.
I love that. That's amazing. Well, I know we only have a few minutes left, but I kind of wanted to ask you, I think, in the spirit of the new year, I know that things like professional development, professional advancement, maybe on some people's resolution lists. So would love to kind of learn, and kind of get your take. Are there any tips that you have that you've kind of used in your career when it comes to thinking about professional advancements or kind of working your way up the corporate ladder?
Yeah. I think as the director, it took me some time to get to this position, and I had my own shares of navigating different complexities within corporate America, and I've learned a lot in the process. And I think one of the many things that I hold dearly is my network. I think the network that I've built for myself, and that purely happened with an open mind, cold messaging people on LinkedIn, asking them for a coffee chat, understanding what they have to offer, and really learning how they built their career. I think that open mind helped me where I am today. And in the process, I've actually come across some fantastic mentors, who enable me to, outperform. They push me to get outside my comfort zone. And I think I owe it to them, one of the reasons why I'm here today. So I would say for women or for anyone, looking to just think about their career development, your network is your net worth, right? You have to make sure that you have access to smart, charismatic, inspiring people. And it doesn't matter what level they're at. It doesn't matter what company they're at. They just have to inspire you because that's the path you want to follow. And the only way to get to know them better is to send them a message. The worst they can say is a no. And that's okay. You'll find someone else who is happy to have a coffee with you and they'll share a lot about their life. And you just have to have an open ear. So I would say your network is the first thing you should work on. Secondly, I think specifically in the corporate industry that I am in, I think it's important to really harness your soft skills. So I'm thinking in terms of your negotiation skills, your communication, having that understanding of cultural nuances. These start playing a very important role as you climb the ladder or as you try to, collaborate with members across the world. So I work and interact with people not only in the US, but also Europe and Australia. And this understanding of different cultures, having a good relationship building style plays a very important role for me, to make sure that Wicked Smart is a success and that I am a success. So I think that in itself takes some time, and just being around people, being involved in communities is very helpful. And then lastly, I think really kind of harnessing your area. So when I went to digital health, I did not know anything about it. I had to learn, along the way. So I got, actively involved in communities like the Node Health Time. I'm now very involved in HitLab, and I'm still learning. There's still a lot to learn. So from the technical aspect, you have to, as a student, put your head down. You have to learn the things that are happening so that you better understand where the industry is heading. And then through that knowledge, you are able to give back to your team, to your company, to your own startup, perhaps one day. So I think that technical aspect you need to be a constant learner, to be a leader. And I think that's the kind of the vision that I go with.
I love that. You dropped so many great, quotable nuggets. Be a learner to be a leader. Your network is your net worth. I need to write those down somewhere. I think both of those are really great. But really just wanted to thank you for taking the time to chat. I mean, I think I learned so much, and what a great way to kind of kick off the year. So I really appreciate you taking the time here today.
Yeah, thank you, Nina. I really appreciate being a part of the HitLab community, and I'm so glad that I was a part of the first conversation here in 2023. So all the best to Women's Health Wednesdays, and I look forward to being in touch with the rest of the ecosystem this year.
Absolutely. Cheers to 2023.
Yes.
I love it. So just also wanted to let everyone know we do have our next episode next Wednesday. And before I kind of go into that, the AARP, for those that joined a little bit late, the registration application deadline has been extended. So please be sure to check that out. We have our next session, as well as this session, all presented by our amazing sponsors. So I wanted to give them a shout out for sponsoring our conversations for Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. And we'll be starting regular programming starting today as well as next week. So please be sure to check that out. Wanted to give one last huge shout out to Mansa for an amazing conversation, and we will see you all next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Nina. Bye, everyone.